Hey Butler Lab students, our next project for studio art this year is going to be learning how to draw all the different parts of the face so that your drawing looks super realistic. I'm going to be drawing eyes this week, so we're going to practice starting with eyes, and then each week we'll be adding, or each day of the week we're going to be adding a new part, and then at the end of the week we'll practice drawing our portrait. Now I have a third grade guest with me today, my daughter Lucy, who's going to be drawing along with you. Let's go. Now, let's take a look at some eyes. There are lots of different varieties of eyes. When we take a look at these eyes here, there's different shapes and colors and forms, and so every eye is a little bit different. I'm going to be drawing a basic eye today, but if you were to look at yourself in the mirror, it might look different than the eye that I'm drawing today. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to help you improve your eye drawing skills. So one of the first things that you want to start with is the shape of the eye. When we take a look at these eyes here, see if I can pause it, there we go. That one's almost closed, but you can notice that the shape of the eye is almost like a football shape, okay? And we also have this little area here called the tear duct. So we're gonna start by making the shape of the eye, and you'll notice that this eye is more narrow, this one is more wide and open. So we're going to pay attention to the shape of the eye. So a common mistake that people make when drawing the shape of the eye, they will draw their eye as a circle, or sometimes people will draw it like an almond or football shape, but forget the tear duct. Or the top and the bottom might look exactly identical, but on a lot of eyes you might have the top part being a little bit higher like this. It may not be a perfect symmetrical two-sided shape right here. So make sure that when you're drawing the eye that you're really focused on that shape. So I'm gonna draw a little tear duct right here. And you might wanna zoom in on what I'm doing. And then I'm gonna draw the big part of the eye, the football part. It almost looks a little bit like a lemon. The next thing that we are gonna add is the iris of the eye. And the iris is actually the part that has the color. So if someone asked you what color your eyes were and you said, I have brown eyes, that's the color of your iris. And we all know, and when we draw, that our irises are like perfect circles, right? But notice when we look at these eyes that most of them, we have a big overlap where the top of the eye actually covers the top part of the iris. So when we're looking at these eyes, I don't see the whole circle. Now this person's eye is pretty wide open, so I can see almost the very top of the iris there, but for most people in their relaxed state, you don't see the whole iris. And also, sometimes even the bottom of the iris is underneath that bottom eyelid. So this one here, I can see a little bit of white underneath the eyelid, but most of them are just resting the bottom of the iris, that circle, just right on the bottom part of that eyelid. So let's give that a try in our drawings. Common mistake when drawing the iris is, especially if you drew your eye as a circle, is just adding it right to the middle like that. Or if you did do your football shape, a lot of people just draw the iris small and in the middle like that. And we usually do not see eyes with the white of the eye all the way around. So I'm gonna draw my iris here, and I don't want to draw my circle right in the middle like this. That's a mistake that a lot of people make. You would only be able to see the white of your eyes all the way around your iris if you were terrified, if you were watching a really scary movie. So I'm actually going to draw my iris so that the bottom of it touches the bottom of the eyelid that I drew, and that the top part of it actually isn't seen. So I'm gonna show you the part that's maybe hidden. That top part there is hidden underneath the eyelid. So I'm not even gonna see that top part there, okay? All right, so the next thing that we're gonna add to our eye drawing is called the pupil. And the pupil is the black circle in the middle of the iris. Remember that the iris is the colored part of the eye, and the black part in that middle is called the pupil. And notice that the pupil is right in the middle of the iris. But we also notice that the iris is not in the middle of the opening of the eye. So some of that iris is usually passing above that eyelid there. So we want to draw our pupil. Usually the pupil is touching the top edge of the eyelid here. Notice this one is not quite touching that top edge, but it's closer to the top eyelid than it is to the bottom eyelid. So we're gonna draw ours similarly. So I'm gonna draw, if I can imagine that this is my whole circle for my iris, sometimes I'll leave that part up there just so I can see. Here's the middle of my iris, right here. And so I'm gonna add that pupil right into the middle of my iris. And it's a perfect circle right in the middle of my iris. I'm gonna shade it in just so I can remember that that's for my pupil. I'll make it darker later. So notice that the pupil isn't really in the middle of the eye, it's actually closer to the top, and a lot of times it's even touching this part right here, okay? So common mistakes that people make is if you have your iris in the middle, then you're just adding it like that. That looks like an eyeball that just fell out of your head. Also, people will add that pupil right to the middle here, and it's going to be right in the middle of their eye. But really what we see in a realistic eye is that the pupil is really closer to this top edge, and in many cases even touching that top edge of the eye. Now the next thing we're gonna add are our eyelids. So you're gonna notice that we have a top eyelid and a bottom eyelid, and these are all really different. So when we look at this person's eyelid here, we notice that there's this crease right here, and this crease is pretty equally distant from where we see the eye here. It's about the same width all the way across, but some people, whoops, I paused it. Some people have a different width. So when we look at this one, you notice that this one has it's really thick right here, and it gets thin as it gets closer or actually farther away from the tear duct. Some people have a flat line right here. So notice that this crease right here in the eyelid is pretty flat and then curves around. This person has a very flat eyelid. In fact, we almost don't see the eyelid at all. It just comes out over here. And this person has a really wide eyelid. I see a lot of their top eyelid, and it's nice and curved like a rainbow here. This person kind of has a medium-sized eyelid, but notice it's pretty flat on the top and then curves down on the corners. So you could have one that's nice and rainbow, like perfect curve like that, or like this one, or you might have one that has more of a flat edge that curves down on the sides. So these ones have flat edge that curves on the sides, and sometimes it might go thick to thin, sometimes it might be the same thickness all the way across. So a lot of times when people draw, they don't even add the eyelid at all. That's the most common mistake. But on our drawing, we're gonna add an eyelid, and I'm gonna make mine, it's just gonna be that crease of skin, and I'm gonna make mine maybe sort of flat on top and curving, like that. So that's gonna be the crease of mine. And always draw lightly because you can anticipate making mistakes and erasing. On the bottom of the eyelid, or the bottom eyelid, you're gonna notice that there's usually some little wrinkle lines. Even in really young people, we have these little creases that shows where our eye skin folds. So you're gonna wanna add a couple of lines to show where that skin crease is there. So this one just has one really light one, this one has 3, and sometimes there's shading underneath, so we're gonna talk about shading a little bit later. So I'm gonna add my bottom eyelid just by adding a couple of creases there. The next thing we're gonna add to our realistic eyes is the thickness of your skin. So notice that your skin has an edge or a little shelf right here in between the eyelid and the eye. So we have this little stripe of skin right here that touches your eye. And a lot of times people do not include that in their drawings. So we want to add that, and it's going to make your drawing look 3D. We normally only see the bottom one. So I'm going to add just a little bit of skin right here. It's just a little shelf or a stripe that shows that my skin has thickness right there. It's 3D. All right, now the last thing that we want to think about before we talk about shading is our eyelashes. So let's see, I guess I'll leave this paused. So when we take a look at our eyelashes, a lot of times we have eyelashes that are clumped together. And boys, you have eyelashes too, so don't forget to add eyelashes on yours if you want yours to look like it's got makeup on, you might add more eyelashes. But if you want it to look a little bit more natural, you probably won't have as many. But notice how eyelashes clump together in these little claw-like looking pointy triangles right here. Some people have more of these clumps like that, and some people have individual little wispy looking eyelashes, okay? You might also notice that eyelashes go from thick to thin, so they're kind of like a claw. They're skinnier on the end and thicker at the base. So we're gonna add these eyelashes. They also a lot of times kind of swoop away in the opposite direction of that tear duct. So we're gonna swoop those away. So you might practice off to the side making some swooping motions like this, and you could thicken these eyelashes down at the bottom. So that's kind of the shape of an eyelash, and they're all gonna be angled away from the tear duct. And I'm just gonna make a couple. One of the most common mistakes with eyelashes is drawing eyelashes like they're rays of the sun, like this. Make a little sunshine here with some sunglasses on. That's how a lot of people draw their eyelashes, which is super cute on a cartoon. But if you want your drawing to look realistic, we wouldn't want to put eyelashes. These look like SpongeBob's eyelashes. We wouldn't want to put SpongeBob's eyelashes on our real eyes. Unless you're drawing SpongeBob, then that's perfect. All right, so now you've drawn the outline, all the shapes of your eye, and now we can start talking about shading. So the first thing we're gonna shade is the iris and the pupil of the eye. And what I want you to notice about the iris is that usually the iris has a darker outline all the way around the edge. So when we look at this brown eye, we notice this darker line all the way around, okay? So I'm gonna shade mine in kind of a medium value color. I'm gonna shade in my pupil black. Now before I do that, I want you to notice that eyes are glossy and reflective because they're wet with moisture. So we can usually see a highlight in your eye, and the highlight depends on where the light source is coming from. So this one looks like it's got a TV screen in the background, and this one has a window in it, and this one just looks like a light bulb that's shining in their eye, and this has a window in it, and this one is just some general light. So a lot of times there's more than one highlight, like on this one here, or there's a definite shape depending on what that person is looking at and where their light is coming from. So on mine, I'm just gonna do a generic highlight. I'm gonna use my eraser and add kind of a big one and a medium or small one there. Another thing you can think about when you're coloring your iris is that this top eyelid is actually sticking out. It has thickness, just like your bottom eyelid has thickness that we drew. It's sticking out, so if we think of it as like a little shelf, it's actually casting a shadow on that top part of your eye.